In the beginning, love didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like sunlight, like easy laughter in the kitchen, like playlists in the car, like his hand finding mine in crowded places without thinking twice. He was the kind of man who looked at you as if your presence made the world quieter. He remembered details. He kissed my forehead before leaving the house. He sent messages that weren't necessary, just wanted. And he talked about the future like it was something we were building together with our bare hands. A home, he'd say, smiling as if he could already see it. A real one. And kids. I want kids. I want to be a dad. He didn't say it once. He said it the way people say the truth, casually, often, without needing to convince anyone. I believed him. We married after 2 years of dating. The wedding wasn't extravagant, but it was intimate and warm. Friends, family, small lights, music that made people cry in the good way. He looked at me like he'd won something rare. I looked at him like I was safe. That was the first version of our story. Safety. I had assets before we married. A property in my name, investments I'd built over time, things I worked for long before I met him. I never hid it. I wasn't ashamed of it, and I didn't use it as a weapon either. It was simply my life, my effort, my security. We signed a marriage contract because we were adults and because I'd seen enough life to know love doesn't cancel paperwork. The contract wasn't cold. It was clear. It protected what each of us brought in. It defined boundaries. It was fair. And there was one clause that mattered, one clause that would later become a mirror that exposed everything about him. It stated, if there was a child, all rights to my premarital estate would belong exclusively to that child, not to the spouse, not to anyone else. The child would be the sole beneficiary of what I had built before marriage. When we signed, he barely blinked. Of course, he said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. That's your child. It should be protected. I remember how relieved I felt hearing that, how mature it sounded, how safe it made him seem. What I didn't know then was that some people agree to rules only while they believe the rules will never actually apply to them. For the first year of marriage, we were happy in the quiet way that matters. We hosted dinners, we planned vacations, we argued about paint colors and laughed 10 minutes later. He brought me coffee in bed on weekends. I folded his shirts. We were a pair. And then naturally, the conversation turned into attempts. At first, it was playful, hopeful. Maybe this month, he'd say, grinning like a kid who thought wishes were guaranteed. We tracked cycles lightly, not obsessively. We tried not to let it become pressure, but months passed, then a year. Some women describe infertility like a scream. For me, it arrived like a slow fog. It didn't come with one devastating moment. It came with a sequence of small disappointments that stacked quietly until they became heavy. Negative test, polite smile, private tears. The world keeps moving while your dream pauses, and no one teaches you how to hold that stillness. We went to doctors. At first, they tested me. Hormones, ultrasounds, questions about stress, diet, age, everything that makes a woman feel like her body is being evaluated like a project. My results were fine. Not perfect, but fine. Then they tested him. He was supportive at the appointments. At least he looked supportive. He sat beside me, his hand on my knee, nodding as if we were in this together. And when the doctor suggested we consider freezing genetic material as a precaution, just to keep doors open, the doctor said, he agreed quickly. Yes, he said, let's do it. Whatever it takes. I remember leaving the clinic that day with a strange mix of grief and hope. Grief because we weren't the easy couple anymore. Hope because we still had options. We signed papers. There were forms, receipts, medical jargon. We trusted the process. What I didn't realize was that trust can be shared, while truth is not. Over the next 2 years, we tried treatments. Not dramatic movie scenes, real ones, injections that bruised, appointments that stole mornings, waiting rooms filled with women who smiled like they were fine and looked like they weren't. I learned to swallow disappointment in public and let it spill in private. He seemed present, But something in him began to shift, not sharply at first, subtly, like a light turning down one notch at a time. He started working late more often. He became impatient when I talked about appointments. He stopped saying, "when we have kids," and started saying, "if." I told myself it was stress. Men process differently, I thought. He's tired, he's scared too. Then came the pause. One night, after another failed attempt, I sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted in a way sleep doesn't fix. I expected him to hold me, to say something comforting. Instead, he exhaled like the situation was a bill that kept coming back. "We should take a break," he said. A break from treatments, he meant. A break from the constant calendar of hope and disappointment. It wasn't unreasonable, but something in the way he said it, too calm, too final, made my stomach tighten. "Just for a little while," he added. "We'll try again later." I nodded. I agreed. My body wanted the break. My heart needed it. Still, that night, as I lay beside him in the dark, I felt something I couldn't name. Not fear, not yet. More like the first crack in a glass you didn't realize was fragile, because love can survive a lot. But love struggles when one person quietly starts leaving, while still standing in the same room. And I didn't know it then, but the pause wasn't only a pause in treatments, it was the beginning of a plan I never agreed to be part of. The pause was supposed to bring us peace. That's what he said, at least. That stepping back from treatments would give us space to breathe, to reconnect, to remember that we were more than test results and appointment schedules. But peace never came. Instead, something else settled between us. Something heavier, quieter, harder to confront. Distance. At first, it was subtle enough to ignore. He spent more time on his phone, scrolling through messages that stopped the moment I entered the room. He answered questions with half sentences. He kissed my cheek instead of my lips. Small things, easy to excuse. I told myself I was being sensitive, that infertility makes you see shadows where there are none, that not every silence means betrayal. But silence, when repeated, becomes a language of its own. He started coming home later, always with explanations that sounded reasonable on the surface, but hollow underneath. Work ran late. A colleague needed help. I just needed some air. Air. That word stayed with me. Because people who ask for air are usually already suffocating somewhere else. At dinner, he barely touched his food. When I talked about normal things, a book I was reading, plans for the weekend, he nodded without listening. His eyes weren't on me. They were somewhere far ahead, as if he was already walking into a life I wasn't invited to. And then came the pregnancy. It wasn't planned the way movies show it. There were no balloons, no grand surprise. Just a test, taken quietly in the bathroom, early in the morning, while the house was still asleep. 2 lines, clear, undeniable. My hands started shaking before my brain could catch up. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at that little piece of plastic like it was something holy, something fragile, something that could disappear if I looked away too fast. After years of waiting, after disappointment and injections and pauses, it had finally happened. I cried, not loudly, not dramatically, the kind of cry that feels like your body releasing something it's been holding for too long. I wanted to tell him immediately. I wanted to wake him up, to watch his face change, to finally see joy replace that distance. But something stopped me, a quiet instinct. The same one that had been whispering to me for months. Wait. So I waited until later that day, until we were both awake, until I could tell him properly. I stood in front of him, holding the test in my hand, my heart beating so hard I thought he could hear it. "I'm pregnant," I said, smiling despite the fear. For a second his face went blank. Not shock, not happiness. Blank. Then his eyebrows tightened slightly, like someone doing math in their head. "Are you sure?" he asked. That was it. No hug, no smile, no, "we did it," just that question. "Yes," I replied, confused. "I'm sure." He looked away, ran a hand through his hair, sat down heavily on the couch as if the news had taken something out of him instead of giving something to us. "What about the date?" he asked next. I felt my smile falter. The date, I repeated. You know, timing, he said. I mean, we weren't trying recently. The room felt suddenly colder. We used the frozen material, I said carefully, like we planned. And there's also a chance it happened naturally before the pause. The doctor explained that. He didn't respond right away. He nodded slowly, but his eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the floor, calculating. In that moment, something inside me shifted, because that wasn't fear of fatherhood. That was fear of consequence. Over the next days, his behavior changed even more. He avoided the subject of the baby entirely. If I mentioned doctor appointments, he changed the topic. If I spoke about names, he smiled politely and said it was too early, too early. The man who once dreamed out loud about being a father now acted like the idea was a burden he hadn't agreed to carry. I started paying attention, not with suspicion at first, with awareness. And awareness, once awakened, sees everything. I noticed the late-night messages, the way his phone was always angled away from me, the way he laughed softly at something on the screen and then went silent when I asked what it was. One evening while he was in the shower, his phone lit up on the bedside table. A name I didn't recognize, Clara. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. The number of notifications was enough. Conversations don't build themselves. Later that night, when he lay beside me, his back turned, I stared at the ceiling and felt something settle in my chest. Not heartbreak, clarity. I realized then that he wasn't afraid of being a father. He was afraid of what fatherhood would take away from him. And the more I thought about it, the more one thing became impossible to ignore. The contract. That clause we signed so casually years ago. The one he agreed to without question, the one that stated that if a child existed, my premarital estate would belong entirely to that child. At the time, it sounded like protection. Now, it sounded like a threat to him. That night after he fell asleep, I got out of bed and went to the living room. I opened the drawer where we kept important documents. Slowly, carefully, I took out the contract and read that clause again, word by word. It hadn't changed. But something else had. He had. I began to understand the silence, the distance, the panic in his eyes when I said I was pregnant. This wasn't about love ending. This was about control slipping. And men who fear losing control rarely leave quietly. They prepare. They calculate. They build stories where they are not the villains, but the victims. I didn't know yet how far he was willing to go, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever was coming next, it wouldn't be an honest conversation. It would be a performance. And if he was preparing a stage, I needed to prepare something stronger. Not arguments, not emotions, proof. Once awareness settles in, it doesn't leave. It doesn't scream. It doesn't accuse. It simply starts connecting dots you once refused to see. After the night I reread the marriage contract, I stopped expecting honesty from him. Not because I had proof yet, but because his fear had finally revealed itself. And fear, when mixed with self-interest, doesn't produce truth. It produces strategy. I began paying attention in a different way, not as a wife hoping to be reassured, but as a woman protecting herself. His routine became predictable in its unpredictability. He left early, returned late, answered messages with his back turned. When I spoke, he listened just enough to seem polite. When I stopped speaking, he didn't notice. One afternoon, he came home smiling, a genuine smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. He set his phone on the counter, still unlocked, before realizing what he had done. I wasn't trying to look, but sometimes the truth puts itself in your line of sight. A message preview lit the screen. I miss you already, from Clara. I didn't grab the phone. I didn't scroll. I didn't confront him. I didn't need details to understand what kind of betrayal this was. It wasn't about sex. It was about escape. She represented the life he wanted next, uncomplicated, unburdened, free of contracts and consequences, a life where my pregnancy didn't exist. That realization hurt less than I expected, because pain implies surprise. And by then, I wasn't surprised anymore. That evening, I tested him, not aggressively, quietly. "You've been distant lately," I said as casually as I could. "Is something wrong?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough. "No," he replied, "I'm just tired. A lot on my mind." Tired. That word again. People lie best when they use words that sound reasonable. I nodded. I didn't push, because I wasn't looking for confession. I was looking for confirmation, and I got it. 2 weeks later, while organizing paperwork, something he never bothered to do, I found a medical receipt buried among old insurance documents. At first, it meant nothing. Then I read the specialty, urology. The date caught my attention. It fell right in the middle of the period when we had paused treatments. I felt my pulse quicken. I didn't panic. Panic wastes energy. I searched calmly. More receipts, a referral, a post-operative instruction sheet. And then the word that made everything fall into place: vasectomy. My hands went cold, not because of the surgery itself, but because of the timing. He had made a permanent decision about reproduction without telling me, without discussing it, without explaining, without considering me. I sat at the table for a long time, staring at those papers. That's when I understood something crucial. The pause in treatments had never been mutual. It had been final, for him. What he didn't know was that his secret didn't save him, because the medical facts were clear. Even after a vasectomy, fertility doesn't disappear instantly. There is a window, one doctors explained very clearly, during which pregnancy is still possible. And beyond that, there was the frozen genetic material. The clinic records were undeniable. The baby growing inside me had 2 possible paths to existence. Both led back to him. That meant something terrifying and empowering. He was preparing to accuse me of betrayal, and I could prove he was lying. That night, I placed my hand on my belly for the first time with full awareness. Not hope, responsibility. "I've got you," I whispered, "no matter what." Something settled inside me then. I stopped grieving the marriage I thought I had, because grief requires believing something can be saved. This couldn't. From that moment on, every decision I made had one purpose: protection, not revenge, not exposure, protection. He underestimated me. That was his biggest mistake. He still saw the woman who waited patiently in doctors' offices, the woman who cried quietly and tried again, the woman who believed words. He didn't see the woman who knew how to read documents, who understood contracts, who respected facts more than feelings. And he certainly didn't see a mother yet. But I was already becoming one. I requested copies of everything: clinic reports, DNA documentation, treatment timelines, frozen material records. I didn't rush, I didn't alert him. I moved slowly, the way people do when they know timing matters more than speed. At the same time, his behavior shifted again. He became oddly pleasant. Compliments returned, small gestures, forced affection, not love, repositioning. He was preparing for something. I didn't know the shape of his plan yet, but I knew one thing for certain: whatever he was about to do, it wouldn't be private. Men who fear losing control don't confront behind closed doors. They perform. One night, he casually mentioned inviting friends over soon. "Maybe a gathering," he said. "People would like that." I nodded. Inside, I already knew. The stage was coming, and when it arrived, I would not be the woman he expected to see standing on it. He didn't confront me. He didn't argue. He didn't accuse. Instead, he did something far more effective. He started talking to everyone else. It began innocently enough, or at least it looked that way from the outside. A phone call here, a coffee there, a casual conversation after work. He never said my name with anger. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. He spoke softly, carefully, like someone carrying a burden he hadn't chosen. "I'm just confused," he told his mother one afternoon, loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. "I never imagined I'd be going through something like this. Something like this." That phrase became his favorite. It suggested betrayal without stating it. It invited doubt without evidence. It made people lean in. And people always lean in when someone sounds wounded. I learned very quickly how effective his strategy was. Friends stopped calling me the way they used to. When they did, their voices carried a strange hesitation, not concern, not warmth, but uncertainty. "How are you holding up?" they asked. I imagine things must be complicated right now. Complicated. That word didn't mean what it pretended to mean. It meant we don't know what to believe. He had succeeded in doing exactly what he wanted, creating space for suspicion to live. And suspicion doesn't need proof. It only needs silence. He became the image of restraint. He spoke about responsibility, about honesty, about how painful it was to question trust. He never mentioned the contract, never mentioned the vasectomy, never mentioned Clara. Instead, he spoke about disappointment. "I just want the truth," he repeated to anyone who would listen. "That's all I've ever wanted." Truth, coming from him, had become a costume, and people believed it, not because they knew it was true, but because it sounded reasonable. One evening I heard him practicing, not on a stage, not into a mirror, on the phone. "I don't want to expose anyone," he said, lowering his voice, "but I also can't pretend I'm okay." He paused, listening. Yes, that's exactly it. "I'm trying to handle this with dignity." Dignity. I stood in the hallway, unseen, listening to the man I married narrate a story where I no longer existed as a person, only as a problem. That was the moment it became clear. He wasn't preparing for a conversation. He was preparing for an audience. At family gatherings, the atmosphere shifted. People smiled politely, but avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Laughter felt forced, brittle. No one accused me directly. They didn't need to. Judgment, when shared quietly, becomes efficient. I felt it in the way questions were framed, in the pauses after my answers, in the sudden concern for his emotional state, never mine. And still, I said nothing. Silence is often misunderstood. People think silence means confusion, or fear, or guilt. But silence can also mean preparation. I knew something they didn't. Anyone who defends themselves before being accused already sounds desperate. And desperation was exactly what he wanted from me. He wanted tears. He wanted denial. He wanted emotion he could point to and say, "See?" I refused. At one gathering, I noticed her. Clara. She wasn't introduced. She didn't need to be. She stood slightly apart, observing, not the way guests observe a room, but the way someone evaluates an outcome. Her eyes followed him, then me. There was no hostility in her expression, only confidence. She believed the story he was telling. And worse, she believed it was working. Isolation doesn't happen all at once. It happens when your support system is quietly redirected, when people check on you less, when invitations slow down, when conversations become shallow. I spent more time alone, more time thinking, more time preparing, because isolation has one advantage. It sharpens focus. One night as we sat in the living room, he looked at me carefully, the way someone looks when they're trying to trigger a reaction. "You've been very quiet," he said. "Don't you think it's strange?" I met his eyes. "Strange how?" I asked. He shrugged. "People are starting to notice." Notice what? He didn't answer. He wanted me to ask, to push, to reveal something prematurely. I didn't. I smiled slightly. "People notice a lot of things," I said. "That doesn't mean they understand them." He looked away. A few days later, he mentioned it casually, too casually. "Maybe we should do something nice," he said. "Bring people together." "Like what?" I asked. "A gender reveal," he replied. "Everyone deserves to share this moment." There it was, the stage, the moment he would solidify his version of the truth. And for the first time since this had begun, I felt calm, because now I knew exactly when the truth would need to appear. Not before, not after, but right there, under the same lights he was counting on to protect him. I agreed, not eagerly, not hesitantly, simply, "Okay." The relief on his face was immediate. He thought my agreement meant submission. He thought silence meant surrender. What he didn't understand was this: silence, when paired with evidence, is not weakness. It's timing, and timing was now on my side. Once the decision was made, everything moved quickly. He took control of the preparations with an energy I hadn't seen in years. Venues were suggested, decorations discussed, guest lists expanded. He spoke about colors, screens, music, details that made the event feel celebratory on the surface. But beneath all of it, I could sense the tension driving him forward. This wasn't joy. It was urgency. He practiced his tone everywhere, on the phone, in front of the mirror, in casual conversations that were anything but casual. "I just want everyone to understand," he said often. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone." That sentence appeared again and again, like a line memorized too well. I noticed how he framed everything around his pain, his confusion, his dignity. There was no space in his narrative for my body, my treatments, my sacrifices, and certainly no space for the child growing inside me. The night before the gender reveal, he approached me with an unfamiliar softness. "I think tomorrow will be intense," he said, sitting beside me. "Maybe we should align what we're going to say." Align. That word carried weight. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well," he hesitated, "just so things don't get messy. Emotions can spiral." I looked at him calmly. "I don't plan to say anything," I replied. Relief flashed across his face before he could hide it. "Good," he said quickly. "That's probably best." In that moment, I understood something clearly. He believed my silence meant consent, and I let him believe it. While he rehearsed his story, I finalized mine, not with words, but with facts. I organized everything carefully. The marriage contract with the clause highlighted, the fertility clinic records, the documentation of the frozen genetic material, the medical explanation of fertility timelines post-vasectomy, the DNA report. I didn't stack them randomly. I ordered them the way truth should be revealed, logically, calmly, undeniably. I also made one specific request to the event coordinator: a large screen, not decorative, functional, and access. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Not because I was afraid of him, because I was aware of what public truth costs. There is a price to clarity, and I knew I would pay it in looks, whispers, and judgment, even after everything was proven. But then, I felt movement, a soft kick, a reminder. This wasn't about pride, this wasn't about revenge, this was about making sure no one could ever rewrite my child's story. The day arrived heavy with expectation, the house filled with boxes, flowers, cables, lights. Everything looked beautiful, perfectly curated. He moved through it all with confidence. "This is going to change everything," he said more than once. It would, just not the way he imagined. Friends, family, colleagues, phones were already out. Smiles practiced, excitement loud. People hugged me cautiously, unsure of how close to stand. Some whispered congratulations, others avoided conversation altogether. I accepted everything with grace. Because grace disarms people more effectively than anger ever could. Right before things officially began, he found me standing alone. He searched my face, nerves, fear, a crack. He found none. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I replied simply. "Are you?" He forced a smile. Of course. But the confidence he had carried for weeks was starting to thin. As the host called everyone's attention and the lights dimmed slightly, I felt something settle in me. Calm. Not the absence of fear, the mastery of it. I wasn't about to interrupt him. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to let him finish his performance. Because once a lie is spoken publicly, the truth doesn't need to raise its voice. It only needs space. He stepped forward, microphone in hand. The room quieted. Every eye turned toward him. And as he opened his mouth to speak, I realized something that surprised even me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was ready. Ready to end a story that was never written with honesty. Ready to begin another, one my child would never have to explain. He believed power came from speaking first, from controlling the narrative, from choosing the stage. But he misunderstood something fundamental. power doesn't come from being heard, it comes from being undeniable. And in a few moments, he would learn the difference. The room fell quiet the way it does before something breaks, not silence from respect, silence from expectation. He stepped forward with the microphone, shoulders back, jaw tight. The lights reflected off the decorations, turning everything warm and festive, as if the setting itself were trying to contradict what was about to happen. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he began, his voice steady. "Family, friends, people who matter to us, to us." The phrase landed awkwardly. He paused, letting the attention settle on him. He knew how to use pauses. He had practiced them. A pause makes people lean in. It makes them feel included in something important. "There are moments in life," he continued, "when you think you know someone completely." A few heads nodded. "And then something happens that forces you to question everything." I felt eyes turning toward me. Not openly, not yet, but enough to feel the shift in the room's temperature. He took a breath, slow and deliberate. "I've always believed trust is the foundation of marriage," he said. "Without it, there is nothing." That was when I knew he wouldn't say my name. He didn't need to. "I never imagined I'd be standing here today," he went on, lowering his voice slightly, "having to speak about something this painful." Painful. The word carried sympathy with it. People respond to pain instinctively. They soften, they excuse, they protect. "I didn't want to expose anyone," he said, emphasizing the word expose just enough to let it sink in. "But I can't live a lie." There it was. The room tightened. Phones rose higher. Someone near the back whispered something I couldn't hear. A woman in the front row pressed her lips together, already choosing a side. He finally turned toward me. His eyes didn't carry rage. They carried expectation. This was the part where I was supposed to cry, or shout, or deny everything too loudly. Instead, I met his gaze calmly. "The baby," he said slowly, clearly, "is not mine." The words fell into the room like a glass dropped on stone. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered, "Oh no." A chair scraped softly against the floor as someone shifted. I felt the weight of every assumption land on my body at once. He held the microphone tighter, as if grounding himself in the sound of his own voice. "I've always wanted to be a father," he continued, his tone now tinged with something that sounded like heartbreak. "That's what makes this so difficult." Difficult. Not devastating, not confusing. Difficult. Because in his story, this wasn't a tragedy. It was a justification. "I didn't come here to attack anyone," he said. "I just want clarity. Honesty. Honesty." The irony sat heavy in the air, unnoticed by everyone except me. He shook his head slightly, as if disappointed by his own fate. "I won't take responsibility for something that isn't mine," he concluded. That sentence did exactly what he intended. It painted him as reasonable, measured, a man forced into an uncomfortable truth, and it painted me as everything else. He lowered the microphone slightly and looked directly at me. "Aren't you going to say anything?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. The room held its breath. This was the moment he had rehearsed, the moment where emotion would betray me, where I would defend myself too fast, too desperately. I didn't. I stood slowly, without urgency, without drama. "No," I said calmly, "you can continue." Confusion flickered across his face. It wasn't the response he expected. He cleared his throat. "I think it's important," he said, turning back to the audience, "that everything is transparent." Transparent. Another carefully chosen word. He gestured toward the large screen behind him. "Since we're already here to reveal important things," he said, "it's better to make them clear for everyone." The screen lit up faintly behind him, still showing decorative visuals. This was the climax he had imagined. Public accusation, public distance, public exit. He believed he had achieved what he came for. He believed the room was his. As he spoke, I noticed something no one else did. He wasn't angry, he was relieved. Relief doesn't come from betrayal. It comes from escape. This wasn't a man devastated by the possibility of infidelity. This was a man freeing himself from obligation, from a child, from a contract, from consequences, and in that moment I understood the full shape of his plan. Accuse me publicly, create doubt, walk away clean, or so he thought. He stepped back slightly as if finishing a performance. "That's all I have to say," he declared. The host hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. People whispered. Some avoided looking at me altogether. I took one step forward, not toward him, toward the center of the room. "Now," I said calmly, my voice carrying without effort, "we can show the truth." The words cut through the noise like a clean blade. He froze. The relief vanished from his face. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice sharp for the first time. I didn't answer him. I looked toward the screen. "You can switch it now," I said softly. He took a step toward me, lowering his voice. "This isn't necessary," he muttered. "You're making a mistake." A mistake. The word tasted familiar. It was the same word he had used when he suggested we pause treatments, when he decided things alone, when he assumed silence meant submission. I met his eyes. "No," I replied. "This is clarity." For the first time that night, he looked afraid, not of exposure, of loss of control. As the screen behind him went dark, anticipation replaced judgment. People leaned forward again, not to watch me fall, but to understand what was happening. He still believed he could manage it, that whatever appeared next could be explained, softened, twisted. He was wrong, because lies collapse the moment they meet evidence. And evidence was already waiting. The screen flickered, and with it, the story he had told so confidently began to unravel. Some people don't fear lies being exposed. They fear the moment they lose control of the story. The screen lit up slowly, not with colors, not with music, not with celebration, with white. A clean, clinical white background filled the space, sharp against the warm decorations around it. The contrast alone made people sit up straighter. At the top of the screen appeared a logo, a fertility clinic. Not just any clinic, one several people in the room recognized by name, respected, known. A murmur spread through the guests, low and uncertain. "What is this?" someone whispered. He turned sharply toward the screen, then back to me. "You didn't have to do this," he said through clenched teeth. I didn't respond. Because this wasn't a conversation anymore. It was documentation. A file number appeared, dates, signatures. The screen zoomed in slowly, deliberately, so no one would miss it. Fertility treatment record under it. A line highlighted in soft yellow. Genetic material used. Registered donor. His full name. The room went still. Someone gasped openly this time. "That's..." A woman near the front began, then stopped. He stepped back, shaking his head. "This proves nothing," he said quickly. "That doesn't..." I raised my hand slightly. "Please," I said calmly, "let it continue." My voice didn't tremble. That unsettled people more than shouting ever could. The screen shifted. A timeline appeared, simple and clear. Date of genetic material freezing, dates of treatment, date of pregnancy confirmation, each point connected by a thin line. It was impossible to misunderstand. A voice from the back of the room broke the silence. So, the baby could only be his. He opened his mouth, closed it. The next slide appeared without pause. A lab report, numbers, percentages, bold text. At the center of the screen, paternity confirmed. Nanise Sindin 0.9% match. No interpretation required, no room for debate, no ambiguity. The word confirmed sat there unmovable. A chair scraped loudly as someone stood up. Another guest covered her mouth with both hands. He stared at the screen, color draining from his face. This doesn't make sense," he stammered. I had a procedure." That was the moment. The moment he revealed the next truth himself. The screen changed again. Another document appeared. This one caused a collective intake of breath. Surgical record. Vasectomy performed. The date was highlighted in red. It was months after the genetic material had been frozen. Months after we were still trying. months before I became pregnant. The room erupted into whispers. He did it without telling her. That's possible. Oh my God, I finally spoke again. He had a vasectomy, I said calmly, without telling me, without discussing it, while still married to me. I paused, and while still benefiting from the belief that we were trying for a child. Every eye in the room turned to him. No one defended him. Not his mother, not his friends, not even Clara, who stood frozen near the back, her earlier confidence evaporating. The story he had built collapsed in real time. He tried to regain control. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "I did it because I was confused, because things weren't working, because you didn't want a child." Someone interrupted quietly. That sentence landed harder than any accusation I could have made. I nodded once toward the screen. The next slide appeared. A paragraph from the marriage contract, highlighted, clear. "In the event of a biological child, all premarital assets shall be transferred to said child." A man near the front exhaled slowly. "So that's why," he said. No one disagreed. The energy changed completely. People who had avoided my gaze earlier now looked directly at me, some with shame, some with apology, some with something close to awe. He stood in the center of the room, no longer elevated by the microphone, no longer protected by ambiguity, just a man surrounded by his own decisions. "The baby is his," I said, my voice steady. "It always was." I let that settle. "The only thing that wasn't real," I added, "was the story he told you tonight." No one argued. There was nothing left to argue about. He didn't lose his marriage that night. That had already ended. He lost something else. Credibility. Once credibility is gone, explanations sound like excuses, and excuses don't survive evidence. I took a slow breath. "Since we're here," I said softly, "there is still one last thing to reveal." Several people leaned forward again, not out of curiosity, out of respect. He looked up at me, eyes wide. Fear, real fear, because he finally understood. The stage he had chosen was no longer his. For a few seconds, no one moved, not because they were waiting for instructions, but because the room was still adjusting to the weight of the truth. I stood there, centered, one hand resting gently on my belly. "This gathering was planned as a reveal," I said softly, "and despite everything that happened, I still believe it deserves to be." He shook his head, almost pleading. "Please," he whispered, "don't do this." For the first time that night, his voice wasn't confident, it was small. I looked at him once, not with anger, not with triumph, with closure. "This was never meant to hurt you," I said. "It was meant to protect her." I nodded toward the technician. The lights softened. The screen went dark for a brief moment, and then the sound came first. A steady rhythm filled the room. Thump, thump, thump. A heartbeat, strong, calm, alive. No music followed it. No dramatic effect. Just life announcing itself without permission. Several people instinctively placed a hand over their chest. Someone near the back began to cry quietly. The ultrasound appeared on the screen, clear, intimate, unmistakable. My daughter, inside my womb, curled into herself, unaware of contracts, lies, or accusations. And then, as if on cue, she moved. A tiny hand rose. A small finger found its way to her mouth. She began sucking her thumb. Peaceful. A collective breath moved through the room. No one spoke. No one needed to. I turned slowly toward the guests. "This wasn't how it was supposed to be," I said quietly. "But she is already very loved by me." I paused. "And she always will be." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain further. I didn't need to. He stood frozen. The woman who had once watched with confidence now stared at the floor, her face pale. A few minutes later, she slipped out quietly, unnoticed. He didn't follow. He couldn't, because there was nowhere left to go. Everything he had tried to escape was standing right there, undeniable, documented, alive. People approached me slowly. Some apologized without words. Some offered quiet hugs. Some simply nodded, eyes full. No one defended him. No one questioned the truth anymore. Public lies don't survive public clarity. I picked up my bag. As I walked toward the door, I stopped for one final moment. The truth doesn't need to be loud, I said calmly. It only needs space to appear. Then I left. Not hurried, not broken, whole. My daughter was born into peace. Her future was secured, her rights protected, exactly as the contract intended, exactly as love demands. He tried to negotiate later, tried to explain, tried to rewrite the story in private. But some things cannot be edited after the truth has been spoken in front of witnesses. What he lost that night wasn't money. It was credibility. And credibility, once gone, never returns quietly. I didn't walk away victorious because I exposed him. I walked away victorious because I refused to let his fear define my child's beginning. There are people who turn love into leverage, who turn silence into guilt, who believe stages protect them. They forget one thing. Truth also likes an audience, and when it appears, it doesn't destroy, it reveals. I didn't lose love, I lost a lie, and I gained something far greater. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Stories We Tell, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us keep creating stories about love, forgiveness, and second chances, because stories that touch the heart deserve to be told and remembered. Thank you for being here.